Good evening. I'm Lisa Best, and on behalf of the Yonkers Voice family, we're here at the wonderful, beautiful home of Mr. Perstine Wesley, who is the proprietor of Harry's Shoe Repair. And we are here to speak to you about the history of the shop, your history and accomplishments during your time here in Yonkers, and to let the audience get to know what your accomplishments and contributions have been to the city of Yonkers. So, audience, Mr. Perstine Wesley. Mr. Wesley, I have to say that I have remembered you since I was a very little girl. And in the days of the Woodworth stores and I believe Woodrow Jewelers,
Right.
Lenz and Howlands, and all of these different businesses that have come and gone. And as a little girl, all I remembered everybody talking about was Harry's store, Harry's shoe store, Harry's shoe store.
Right.
As I got older, people started talking about Perstine wasn't. I'm like, who is Perstine? And I realized that there is a story behind why it's Harry's shoe store. Would you be able to tell us about the beginnings and the history of Harry's shoe repair?
Well, actually, Harry Shuripi has a very long history.
Yes, sir.
Uh, the gentleman who owned it prior to me taking over, his name was Howard Ward. The business got started on Palisade Avenue, actually. Uh, and we moved to North Broadway in the location that we're at today. And it was either 59 or the early 70s. No, it had to be in the late 50s. And then we moved to North Broadway in the early 60s.
So the business is actually, you're retiring after 54 years, am I correct?
Right.
But the business has been around longer than
Been
that.
around longer, yes,
Okay.
definitely. I can't give you the exact years, but it had to be around at least, I've been there for 54, which is 1962. And they was on Palisade Avenue in the 60s that I do. I don't know what year exactly that they was on Palisade, but that's where they were originally. We've come into North Broadway.
Well, that is wonderful. Could you tell us a little about your friend that you opened the store with? I know that there is a little history there, if you don't mind.
No, not at all. The gentleman's name was Harold Ward.
Yes.
And how it really got started, I was with a young lady one day who was a friend of mine, and she needed some shoes dyed. So she asked me would I go to the square with her. I wasn't too familiar with the square at that time because I was just arriving here. I wasn't here that long. So I said, yeah. So we went into the square and walked into Harry's Shoe Repair, and there was this gentleman who was very stocky, very friendly, and she told him what she wanted, and he agreed to do it. And during the conversation, I just mentioned the fact that I was a shoemaker myself. So with that, that's what really got the boat rolling between him and I in terms of what I do. So with that, he said, well, can you help me sometime? So I agreed to that. I said, yes, I'd be happy to help you. So we got started. I began to work with him part-time. And as time went by, he said to me one day, he said, you know, I would love to go back home. He was from Alabama.
Okay.
He said, I would love to go back home and would like for you to take over the shop. Well, of course, I didn't know how to accept that because we really didn't know each other a few days, you might say. Maybe even longer, of course. But anyway, I couldn't believe that he wanted me to have the shop. But what really got me when he said, I don't want any to pay for it, he says, I'm going to give you the shop.
Wow, that is amazing. For me to get this correct, and so that our audience understands, you meet this gentleman going into the store
Right,
for a young lady to get her shoes dyed.
right, exactly,
The midst of the conversation, you mentioned that you do shoe repair as well.
right.
And in that short time, in the span of a week or so, he offered you the shop?
He offered me the shop. But of course I was, I couldn't believe it. That this gentleman would do that because we don't really know each other. But anyway, it went along, I guess, for about a year. He would talk about it off and on. And I would just say, okay. And I remember the last time we spoke about it, he mentioned the fact that he had spoken to his attorney, and he was in the process of putting the paperwork together. And he was going to go back to Alabama. So that was the agreement. But what happened, he was sick. But I didn't know it. His wife didn't even know it. But we knew something was going on with him, but we couldn't put our fingers on it. But anyway, as time went by, he got worse with the illnesses that he was suffering from. And he called me on a Saturday. No, he called me on a Friday. And he said, Wes, he said, I want you to open up the shop on Saturday morning, and you know what to do. So I said, okay, no problem. So he went to the doctor that Saturday morning, and when they left the doctor's office, him and his wife came by the shop, and they got out. Well, he never got into the store itself. I met him on the sidewalk, so we stood there and we talked. So he said, well, just open the shop, and you know what to do. Because he was going to the hospital that same day.
Mm.
So he went to the hospital that Saturday. And I got a call from his wife on Sunday. And he had passed that night.
I believe that I had heard the story like that, but I didn't know that it was such a short passage of time.
Yeah, it was very short, yes. So with that, I just figured, well, this is the end. She'll sell the shop and do whatever she wants to do with it. But what was so strange about it, I guess it all was meant to come together the way it did. But what happened, I was at his funeral, and I got sick. I passed out at the funeral, and I did get the chance to go to the church, but after I got to the church, because this was in the funeral parlor where I passed out at, and while I was in the church, his wife came over. She said, she used to call me Wes. She says, Wes, you don't look good. It's too much for you. Why don't you just go home and don't worry about it? So with that, I left the church, and I went home. About a week or so later, I got sick, like I said. I wound up in the hospital, down at Professional Hospital on Ludlow Street.
Mm.
I wound up there. So I had ulcers. I went to surgery, the whole 9 yards. So while I was there, a friend of mine came to visit me that day, and he said to me, he says, why don't you take over this shop? So I said to him, I said, I don't have any money. I said, I can't take over the shop. And that was in the conversation for as I'm concerned, because he didn't say anymore and I didn't say anymore. About an hour after he left, he went by the store, the shop, and she was there. So he went inside, and he told her that I wanted to take over the shop. So with that, she called me at the hospital. She called me, she said, Wes, she says, a friend of yours just left and said that she was interested in taking over the shop. I said, well, we discussed it. I said, well, I really can't take over the shop. So she says, do you really want the shop? I said, well, yes, I would love to have it, but again, I'm telling you, I don't have the money. She said, well, we'll talk about that. She said, what I'm going to do, she said, I'm going to take the for sale sign out of the window, and I'll pay the rent until you're able to come in and sit down and we'll talk. So that was the agreement. So when I got out of the hospital, I guess about 2 weeks, 3 weeks went by, and I did call her. So she invited me to come down. I went down, and we sat down, and we talked about it. And she said, again, she says, do you want the shop? I said, well, yes. And again, I repeated, I don't have the money. She said, well, no, we're going to work out something. So she said, you go get an attorney and have him to draw up notes. And each note that you present to me, you know, when you give me the amount of money that I'm asking you to pay me per week, I'll give you a note in return until the shop is paid off. So that was the deal, because I didn't have a quarter to buy the shop. So that's how I got the shop.
Now, here's the most interesting part about the shop that I found and a lot of people in the community, the wonderful memorabilia and photos and artifacts. In fact, many of us have named it the African American Museum of Yonkers. How did that all come about?
You know, that was strange, to be honest with you. I was in the shop one day, and two little ladies came in, and they got to talking about trolleys.
The trolleys were running in Yonkers at that time.
Yeah, but I came 10 years later. Trolleys left in 52. I came in 62. So anyway, they got to talking about trolleys, and I was rather interested in what they were saying. Of course, I'd never been on a trolley. So after they left, there was another gentleman who was there, and I said to him, I said, gee, I said, boy, the way they talked about these trolleys, it had to be pretty exciting. And he said it was. And we had a few words, and he left. He came back the next day with a briefcase. He says, come over, have a seat. He said, he looked to be a nice fellow. He said, I'm going to supply you with some trolley pictures, see, because you seem to be a nice guy. He said, but the only problem, don't loan them to anyone, or let anyone come in and just take pictures, because, you know, it's all about history, so don't share it with everybody like that by giving it away. So that was the deal. So as customers would come in, especially the older people, and they saw that I had some pictures on the wall, so they always would say, oh, my grandfather or my father used to drive trolleys. I have a picture, would you like to have it? So that's how it all really got started. So they started bringing me the trolleys pictures, and one day I was just sitting there thinking, I said, this is a great story. And I looked around and I didn't see anything that represented me.
I understand.
And I came up with the idea, I said, since I've been in a short time, I've been in Yonkers, I haven't really seen anything that represented African Americans, period. Just nothing, there was nothing there. So I got the idea. I said, since the trolley cars went so well, people seemed to be interested in what I did with that. I said, I'm going to start collecting famous black people who have made history.
Yeah, because I always come in your shop, and I've seen these pictures over and over and over again throughout my life of Muhammad Ali and, of course, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And then there's the history of the politics of Yonkers, and we have Senator Cousins and former Councilwoman Brandon, and a variety of mayors that have come and gone, newspaper articles. That's why we've nicknamed it the African American Museum of Yonkers,
right?
Because we never found ourselves in the snapshot. We use that term snapshot to say as part of the visual pictorial history of Yonkers, but you've collected a number of pictures and some accolades as well. I remember the celebrity chefs that went on. I don't remember how many years they went on for.
Actually, when I started with Celebrity Chef, they had already had their first year when they first started. I came in the second year. And I was with Celebrity Chef for 11 years, up until they decided to shut it down. So they did it, and I guess it wasn't in operation for about 6 years before they brought it back. But of course, as you know, in the early years, it was a fantastic gathering every year.
It was an amazing gathering. It was a wonderful opportunity to see men that I remembered when I used to come, men that were lending their talents to put together wonderful dishes. And what was the purpose of the celebrity chefs?
Well, actually, the purpose was to help raise funds for the YWCA.
Yes.
that was the purpose.
Yeah, I remember Pat Sadler very fondly held a lot of events and did a lot for the community, much like Mary Gaines, another very favorite person of mine. Now, after Celebrity Chefs, I know that it was laid on your heart. You have continued to uh, look out for those in need, and often you could come in the shop, and as tiny as this shop is, I would see these plastic bins stacked with food that you've collected to give and would give out in the square, clothes, toys at Christmas time. And there's a 5K run. I believe it was you sponsored something like that. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's one of my pet prizes, projects rather. Now, after I left Celebrity Chef, I realized I needed to do something because I'm no longer with Celebrity Chef, so I wanted to do something. So I first came up with the idea of starting up a food pantry.
Mm.
And the food, no, I started the turkey drive.
I remember the turkey drives. Yes.
And I would give away turkeys every Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that was fantastic. It lasted for over 20 years.
Because it was such
In
a
fact,
great need.
as you know, just past year was the last would be the last
The
year now.
last year.
So that lasted for more than 20 years, and I have given away as much as 300 turkeys during Christmas and Thanksgiving, and that was a great success. So with that, I still wasn't happy because I felt I wasn't doing enough. So I came up with the idea of doing a food drive. So I started collecting canned goods, whatever I could get, and that's how the food drive got started. So that was a success, as you know. I still wasn't happy. Now I'm doing all this basically alone
Yes.
because I never went to the public to ask them to help me or organizations to help me. People who knew me, liked me, and I would talk to them just like I'm talking to you.
And you got to know their families. You know, the one thing about you being in the shop, in the square, and I tell my story of being a little girl coming in with my mom, who you knew, that you know, and the different families that have come in and out of the shop. And when you get to know people, you get to know that they have a need.
Right. And in terms of the coach, I mean the 5K run walk race. Over the years, I watched young kids, and their parents would come into my store, and I listened to with the kids how the parents would talk about police. Kids would say things about the police, and I'm saying, well, my God, I said, if I was a kid and I would say something about a kid or an adult in the way these young kids are talking about the cops, I said, I wouldn't have a head by now.
Teeth,
So then
backside.
I decided, I said, well, maybe I can help do something about that. So I got the idea to team up with the Yonkers Police Department. So I sent the mayor and the police commissioner a letter, and I explained to them what I wanted to do and could I meet with them. So they had me to come into City Hall, and I explained to them that I want to start up a 5K run walk race to introduce our youth to the Yonkers Police Department and bring them closer together.
Yeah, fostering a relationship.
Right. So that went over well.
And
But the only problem with that, as great as it was, I couldn't get the African community to participate the way I wanted, because that's who I was really reaching out to participate. But the answers I got from my community, oh, I don't want my kids running with the cops, associating with the cops. And I could never get it through their heads. It's for the benefit of these kids growing up to respect not just cops, but what about you as a parent?
Yes.
And the way you talk to your child, I can understand why they have that attitude toward cops, because you don't teach them anything. But anyway, I can never really get the African community involved. But it still was a success. That lasted for what? About 8 years. It just ended after I got sick
After
this past year.
there was another something else you was involved in, and I was very interested in it, and it was the Black History bus tours of Yonkers.
Oh, yeah.
I believe with then Councilwoman Patricia McDowell.
Right. That was fun. I enjoyed that because you and I worked together on that.
I remember that, and it was just such a wonderful project. I remember being filled with so much pride. It was going back to what was said earlier. You didn't often feel like you was in the snapshot of the city of Yonkers and the history, and the pictures and the shots and the places in Yonkers where the bus stopped really gave me an education, but that was because of you and your collaborations as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. Oh, and the other thing I want to mention also, with the coat drive, I started that because it's hard to watch young kids have to go through a winter
Without coats.
without a warm coat.
Yes.
And I saw so much of that because parents would come in the shop, they dressed up
And
nice
just,
and comfortable. I look at the kids and they got a little sweater on, a little light jacket, and I know they're freezing because I'm freezing.
Yes.
So they got to be freezing too. So I wanted to really do something about that. So that's how the coat drive got started. But I wanted to team up with the fire department. So I went to the fire commissioner and I had a conversation with him. He said, Wes, anything you want, I'll be there for you.
and that's the mark of someone in the community that is respected and admired. And we know, and there may be some of the Yonkers Voice viewing audience that may not know, that Yonkers has had a very tumultuous past with the 25-year desegregation order.
Yeah, we went through all that.
That the schools and housing was separated, and there were too many remembered difficult moments. Mayor Wasisco getting bullets sent to him in the
Right.
mail. Just the Al Sharpton came one year and did a march from Messiah Baptist
Right,
Church
I
over to the
remember that.
Raceway,
Mhm.
and so I'm bringing all that up to say that you've seen leadership in Yonkers coming and going, different mayors, the different divides, and I think even with the Black History bus tour, I didn't know the history of the contributions of African Americans and their growth. Because our bus tour started at Community Baptist.
Community Baptist Church.
And we ended up over in Runyon Heights,
Runyon
which
Heights.
is considered to be like the Scarsdale of black people. When you
Right.
got a little money and you bought a house, you moved to Runyon Heights, and we went across Central Avenue.
We went across Central Avenue to W.C. Handy
Yes.
house.
With who is
W.C. Handy, he was a music composer. He wrote the score about St. Louis Blues,
okay.
and he's from Yonkers.
And we have Ella Fitzgerald
And Ella Fitzgerald, well, she's not actually from Yonkers. She was partly raised in Yonkers.
and raised in Yonkers.
Yeah. So, of course, they got the statue there, which I'm not impressed with it, but it's what it is.
There's the statue that is down by the Yonkers Metro North station.
Right, but it originally wasn't there. It was just under the railroad tracks originally, but they finally moved it and put it where it's at now. But,
Yeah. Now, what I wanted to move a little more into is Yonkers, after the DSEG order, there was great development along the waterfront. And you've been in Getty Square. You've seen businesses come. You've
And
seen
go.
them go. And the testament of you being there 54 years, I know I'm not mistaken when I say that you're the oldest business proprietor still in Yonkers, in Getty
In
Square,
Getty Square, yes.
and black owned business.
True.
How does that make you feel? Do you have any particular feelings about that?
You know, I guess I lasted so long in Getty Square because of my personality. I always took a lot of pride in me and my personality and common sense.
Yes.
So, in fact, I just was discussing with the gentleman today. He wanted to know, how do you do it? He said, people come into your shop and the way they talk to you, you don't get upset. I don't.
No. And you can come into your shop at any time. You have people that come and sit, and they sit, it's like in the barber shops.
Exactly.
People come
To
in
make-
and they
to make
have
it hang.
wonderful.
I don't like it, but I don't. I'm
Like-
not rude to them. I don't say, look, I don't want you here. You know, you can't sit around like that.
Well, it's the safe place, and it's the place where a lot of times we would come to get information about
Well,
what
that's
was
true. I
going
give
on
out
in
a
the
lot of
community.
information.
A lot of
A
information.
lot of information, true.
And I just needed to share this with you. I don't know if I've ever said this to you, but you know, when I was a little girl, and I can't remember the story, they talked about this shoe cobbler, and the people would go to sleep, and they would wake up and they would have these brand new shoes. So when I would come in this shop, I would see that there were shoes piled like higher than you sometimes. And I said, he just reminds me of the little black cobbler in the stories I used to read about as a
Right.
little girl. But you don't see shoe shops anymore. You don't see the kind of relationship that you foster with the community.
No.
Not just people in the community, but the local politicians. The Yonkers bid uh, gave you accolades and named you the mayor of North Broadway.
Well, actually, the way I got the name, the mayor, or where the name of the mayor came from, connected with me was Angelo Martinelli.
I remember Mr. Mayor Martinelli,
Okay.
former Mayor Martinelli.
And that going back almost 50
Decades.
years.
I was young.
And him and I became friends, and he was the mayor at the time when I arrived here. And I don't know, he was a good customer. He always supported me. He would come in, have his shoes repaired. He reported me through most of my.
Now, the Yonkers business bid gave you the named you the mayor of North Broadway. And Getty Square has seen a great decline in the quality of businesses, homelessness, the fights that spill out from the kids coming from school. But mainly, the homelessness has been a big stronghold. If you were sitting across from Mayor Spano right now, what would your recommendations be to revitalize and bring back that greatness that Getty Square has the possibility of being?
Well, I think first we have to go back to the beginning where it all started. And this is going back in the late 60s, early 70s, when the drug scene came along. And we had great shops. As you know, Getty Square was a beautiful area for shopping,
Yeah,
but just hanging out, window shopping, whatever.
you
'Cause
didn't do that.
those days we didn't have balls at the window or anything like that. So when the drug scene came along, all the shops was basically mama and papa type shops. And they got afraid and they started closing up shops, retiring, or whatever. So the square began to take a dive down. And as you know, it went down for quite a few years with the drug scene. And then the homeless scene came along, put it that way.
Mm.
Because in the early years, it was not like that. But now, as you know, it's terrible. People, older people especially, hate to come to the square because they're afraid. Because all these people do is walk up to you and beg for. Most of them basically harmless, but they frighten you anyway because they beg for your money and they on drugs and you name it. Now, as far as what the mayor can do, I think the mayor is doing a good job. And the way he's doing it, I don't necessarily like it, but you can't stop progress. He have no place to put them in terms of, shelters or whatever, because they bring them in, they feed them, they send them to these homeless shelters that night. Till the next day, and they drop them off at Getty Square the next morning. But what he's doing now, and I admire him for what he's doing, because he's really bringing Getty Square back. I have to give him credit for that. The square is going to change, and when the square changes to what he's looking for it to be, the homeless will not be there. I don't know the answer where he's going to put them. I don't have a clue, but I do know they will be gone shortly. I'll give it another year, 2 years tops.
Well, I've noticed since last summer, it really hurt my heart to come into Getty Square and to see homeless. But when I started seeing women and they were sleeping in doorways with no shoes on their
Yeah.
feet in the middle of the day, and urine
Yeah, it was
stenched doorways, business doorways. And when the fire happened, I believe in McDonald's, it almost looked like, well, that's it for Getty Square, because why would I want to come here? Now I'm starting to see that they have a Dunkin' Donuts. I don't see the scourge of just blatant sleeping and laying around on the sidewalks as much. It does look a little better,
A little better.
but there's still a great
But-
way to go.
Yes, but what's going to happen, as you notice now, it is happening. It's taking place. Getty Square not going to be the same Getty Square it was for the past 20 years or so.
No, well, with the waterfront development,
The waterfront development, we have the downtown, North Broadway, Main Street, all the inner streets.
a lot of these places are turning into
And
lofts.
the old buildings are turning into loft space.
Yes,
But the only problem is that
fine dining restaurants.
yes, all of that is going to happen. So that's going to automatically force the homelessness out, because the people we're trying to attract into Getty Square are not coming because of that. But once we clean that up, and the only way they're going to get that cleaned up by doing rebuilding Getty Square. And that will happen. They're just like White Plains when White Plains was being rebuilt.
And now look at White Plains.
Look at White Plains today.
Yes.
And that's what we're looking for here.
And
Same thing.
and some would also say that might mean that there might be some gentrification of the surrounding areas. But I also look at that is that life is about change. And sometimes to move forward, we have to make some changes.
Well, life is changing around Getty Square. Well, throughout Yonkers, not just in the square area. Throughout the Yonkers, the whole city is really changing.
Is about to change.
It's changing.
Well, I would like to say that it is not going to be the same to come into Yonkers and not be able to come and sit in the shop and look at the ceilings and look at the walls and just look at all of the history and wonderful memorabilia, but most importantly, to not be able to have the touch and agree moments that I've always had to. I left Yonkers, and the only reason why I stay when I come to Getty Square is to spend some time with you. Now, there are the committee of the Friends of Mr. Wesley that are doing a retirement dinner for you, I believe, July 8th.
July 8th,
Would
yes.
you be able to give us some information about that?
Yes. Mr. Bruce Lord, who came up with the idea of doing this, and he formed a committee, and they put the program together. And like you just said, it will be held July 8th. Cocktail hours will begin at 7, dinner begin at 8.
And it's going to be
It's
at the
going to be at the
wonderful...
Riverview on the Hudson, Hasten on the Hudson. That's where it will take place. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm really excited about that. And it's going to be bittersweet, though. I'm just hoping to get a great turnout first, put it that way. But Yonkers have been good to me. I really have no complaints about Yonkers. I might complain about some of the politicians, but not complaining about them as a person, but maybe I was doing like the politics of
Yes.
a lot of the
Yes.
politicians. But what happens? You don't see me up to City Hall because I rarely get invited up to City Hall. I have a lot of ideas that I like to discuss with the mayor and councilman, or whoever. But I don't get, I'm not in that clique, so I don't get it. But politics, yeah, I know my politics. And I get, if the mayor and the councilman, whoever, knew how much information I give out about them when it comes election time, because everybody comes to me.
Well, Yonkers Voice family, you have it right here. We've slept on Mr. Wesley. He's been a great advisor to the community. He's had wonderful ideas. And if you would like to come out and celebrate him on July 8th, there will be a retirement party for him at the Riverview on the Hudson, which is the borderline in Yonkers and Hastings. Tickets are $150, and the cocktail hour starts at 7, dinner starts at 8 o'clock. And I'm sure Mr. Wesley would love nothing better than to see all of his friends, community members, and politicians to come out and celebrate him on a wonderful day. I can't think of anyone that deserves a better honor than you do, Mr. Wesley. And it has
Thank
been
you.
my honor and my pleasure to have spent this time with you.
Thank you. It's been an honor to spend this time with you also.
I thank you so much, sir.
Appreciate it.